Hey, David, can you hear me?
You control, you have to.
We don't want them to, we don't want them to log
The
into
mics
the,
are on.
we don't want them logging in for voting or anything for the 4 o'clock. Can we just show the,
Hey, Jeff, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you. David.
the agenda,
Okay.
there's nothing on it.
Do you guys see me or no?
Yeah, we see you fine.
Yeah. Oh, there he is.
Yep,
All
I
right,
see
well, let
him.
me go put clothes on.
PowerPoint comes
There
out,
he
I'm
is.
gonna have to move them off screen.
I see you right there and I can see the PowerPoint.
Uh,
And then it switches to whoever's talking.
Am I clear though, or is it like every other word like some of those guys?
Okay.
No, I can hear you fine.
Transition sometimes.
Yeah.
Great.
So they were working, I tried them out.
Said at the beginning, so do the introduction. So really, I guess if you leave that up, then you make them big, and then once you start, you're gonna. defer.
Yeah.
Hi, Jeff.
So.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
How you feeling?
I feel okay,
Good.
just tired.
I think so.
We'll try, we'll try to fix my login for.
Great.
Can't log in tomorrow. I gave up.
How do I
on it.
make the Zoom screen bigger?
You have to stop sharing.
You gotta stop sharing.
And then it pops up at just a full screen for the talking and then you can hit the sharing again and.
You gotta take the PowerPoint off.
Anyway, for the 4 o'clock meeting, council doesn't need to be in Unicode meetings because they're not taking action.
You just don't watch the screen.
Yeah.
It's off an email.
Start, just make sure the clicker's on.
I got it right here.
Oh, okay, yeah. 'Cause some-
It is off right now.
Yeah, don't turn it on, don't turn it on, don't turn it on.
It's
so
off.
it doesn't-
It's off.
okay.
Which is on the battery to done. And since you're the first to speak, which one am I going?
He's the first. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna be the first. Chief Burke's gonna do an introduction of the.
Yeah.
And then
But
you do the
whoever's
first.
gonna go first. one.
Make sure that's on this.
Mhm.
on that. 63 officers, 4 of them directly do my work.
Okay, well, let me know how that works. It'll be interesting. Unlike me, I'm only asking for one.
Correct.
As far as finance.
Yeah. You go.
Next week, I'm not all.
No problem, ma'am.
Stand on the end, sit on the end, sit on the end.
You said that they're gonna give money according to the PowerPoint, right?
That's why Chris is
Yes.
doing mine.
It's on the line.
Because
Bragging rights.
I control it. PD does never have to ask for money. She's like, "There you go."
Hopefully it's like that. It's not- And they tell us, no, you're gonna take 3 more officers.
No,
No, I wouldn't take a person that works
That's
for
our, but it's the least amount of money, because that usually have the most time. And he said he's not.
But when David was.
Look at my overtime.
Jessica,
Are
when he-
you loving shit? Primary presenter? Yes, sir.
Chase up that.
Yeah.
He said he-
That's fair.
Yes. I brought a jacket.
They're not new. It's just hard to find something to wear them with. I bought the shoes and didn't think about
What's gonna go with it?
Yeah. What am I gonna wear them with?
No, it's that good that.
Well, smoke and mirror, watch the presentation.
The window. Oh, you just tell it tab color.
I know, they always turn up to be the
Which I'm
DJ.
used to.
Worst
in our office.
times
We
to-
can, like, collaborate and then.
To try to schedule something.
What is it
Well,
we're talking
Mondays are
about?
just tough.
Today actually.
I can tell.
Mondays are just tough.
Yeah, Mondays are just. It's an evening.
Can we do that?
I figured there's just so much to cover. We're gonna try to do PD and fire. so no way we can fire.
Get fire
Make
too.
sure you get it.
I've built SharePoint pages in my.
Derek texted me and said he's gonna be a couple minutes late. Do y'all know he's having pacemaker replaced tomorrow morning?
Battery replaced in.
I don't know. They said he goes in tomorrow morning at 7:30. Overnight.
Oh, he's staying over.
He said pacemaker replacement.
Derek?
That's right. It's not just the battery.
Yeah. I don't know anything about that.
If it's the battery, it's overnight.
Yeah, they said they're just keeping them overnight for monitoring.
Yeah, they do it and then they keep you overnight just to make sure that everything works.
To make sure you don't need a jump start.
Yeah,
Whoops.
basically. And then they come in and they go, okay, we're gonna test it. They speed it up and then they slow it down. Yeah. That's the part that's really hard. It's like, okay, I'm running the exercise and I'm not moving.
Yeah. Let's turn this off.
All right, Mayor, I bought a big T, so be cognizant of potty breaks.
Yeah. So, yeah, 1-60. Okay, sounds good. Okay, sounds good. I appreciate it. Yeah, yeah. Either texting
So
or
then-
calling is the best way to
Randy can sign up tomorrow.
Yeah,
go. Okay.
Once we do it tonight.
Maybe in
once we
meetings.
go, yeah, I mean, technically, he could sign up before we call it. That's kind of jumping the gun.
Yeah.
You know, you can apply for anything.
I think
that
I
you
was
know
thinking
is
of
coming
number
back
5.
Before it actually gets called.
Oh,
We just.
Okay.
Of course, that's part of that
Yeah.
whole development thing. That may not.
Okay, you have a good one.
That just looks so far back.
They are further back.
Sorry. I set the room up wrong.
No, I'm not necessarily. designing it, just-
He's been doing this long.
I've seen this movie.
I
Sure.
No, I didn't have time to come home.
Oh.
I said I didn't-
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's oranges, it's not oranges, but greens and browns and purples and red. Those are the ones I have trouble with. Blues, I'm good.
I think it's, it just looks far away. to me.
Normally, we're still on top of the diet. That's why
No, it's fine.
If y'all, yeah, if y'all don't want to be close to us, we get it.
Walk room.
Walk room.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Y'all are a little
So
standoffish.
cool, they can even sign.
You even decreased a row in the public.
They're like, they're afraid.
I know,
What do
right?
you think is gonna happen?
I'm gonna breathe on you.
You know, we don't like change around here. That and mayonnaise looking stuff.
Yeah,
I know, that was not me.
and
I heard
bread,
that walking by and I'm like, oh,
and bread.
that was Sasha. You put some in you. I mean, I didn't mean to throw you. under the bus. You did.
Nothing that resembles man.
No,
My entire,
stuff.
exactly, on the side.
On the side.
So
Where it belongs.
if you enter my sphere, everyone makes fun of me about this. So now y'all can join the club.
Make fun of you also.
Like for not eating
Well,
mayonnaise.
that's okay. Now
or
we have no mayonnaise,
Spoiled milk
no
products of any
eggs,
sort.
no pimento cheese,
Spoiled
no
milk. What does he mean,
pineapple,
like
no
yogurt?
strawberries,
No
no
yogurt.
nuts, no chocolate.
That's right.
She's allergic to it.
Spoiled milk. I had never called.
I'll eat pineapple like on a pizza, but I can't eat much. It's the acid. I can't even really drink margaritas.
Okay.
I mean, if
Just
we go
bring
by what
fried
everybody's
chicken would be
allergic to
good.
and can't
I think it's
stand,
just
we
gonna be
could do
easier to give
bologna
everybody
sandwiches
$10
with
to tell them to stop. it.
And cheese.
Y'all ready? Everybody ready down there? All right, I will call the special workshop to order at 4:02 PM. And I guess we will start, we'll not have our usual opening ceremonies because we will do that at our 6 o'clock meeting. But I will go ahead and call for public comments. Is there anyone from the public here who would like to speak? Nope. All right, seeing none, then we will go straight into the workshop. David?
Mayor and Council, this special workshop, we wanted to call because we want to go through a series of presentations to discuss city operations as we move into this period of current needs, but also as we deal with the changing environment and with growth and with all the different things we're doing through assessments. There are definite things that we want to share with you, the council, and then considerations there once we get all of these done. Over these course of these presentations, the first one will be public safety. We have PD to go up first. We had initially thought about combining public safety together with fire. I believe that the amount of information that we will have for each of these presentations is quite significant. And so this first one is going to get a sense about how much information we need to provide, what your questions are going to be and things like that. And we'll adjust as we go because we do plan on having, of course, the public safety. Public works is a very large one. Community development is a big one, especially with the growth, all the support functions. And then ultimately the last one where we wrap everything together and we talk about the funding options, prioritization of the different programs and projects and things like that. What you will see in these presentations and what we hope to convey across is our current and existing needs, the background on our current operations. So that way there's a better understanding about what we do and why we do those different things. Projecting the growth and what that means to each individual department. Growth will impact each individual department differently. So we want to be able to talk to you about those. When we talk about recommendations and get to that section, that's based primarily on our current level of service. So taking our existing operations and projecting growth, how are we going to maintain what we currently do today? That's our datum. That's what we're trying to shoot for. So the recommendations are based on maintaining those levels of service. And finally, I just leave you with this, is that this is a process. We want to first educate everybody about what we do, how we do it, current needs, and our projections, and what we think that we'll need as we move forward, and hopefully determine and confirm the direction that we're headed. If there's questions or things that we need to change, that's where we want to get from these meetings, and also prioritize the needs that you see. And then finally, the deliverable that I see is the implementation phase. Once we get to the end about what we need to fund, how we need to schedule this, how we need to prioritize, all those different things, hopefully will be the result of all of this work. So with that, Chief Burt was scheduled to be here. He is at home. He will be joining us via Zoom. He did test positive for COVID. So thank you for coming to us from home, Chief.
Oh, yeah, you can tell.
All right,
Thank
Chief
you.
Berger. With
Thank you,
that,
Mayor.
I'll turn it over to you, Chief.
All right. First of all, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to extend my sincere apology. This is really crummy timing. So we've been working really hard to bring you a presentation that was thoughtful and transparent and hopefully easy to understand, and respects Councilman Ford's very large iced tea. So we'll try and be.
Thank you.
We'll try and be respectful of all that. And but it'd be remiss if I didn't thank Sergeant Chris Burns. He's in the audience, and you're going to see a PowerPoint that I would have drawn it with crayons if it were up to me, and explained it this way. But Chris spent about the last 10 days putting this together with some of the thoughts that we had. And so I just want to thank him particularly, but also the other two captains, Ricky Dory and Brandon Potan, who will be presenting. And we'll do a better job than I ever could have anyway. So before we start, I just want to echo a little bit of what David and Jessica's direction were to the department heads. Really was to come up with a present snapshot, put that into future projections, and then really come up with a long-range plan that we hope will not only drive our departments, our internal strategic plans, but will also help give you the opportunity to have an informed decision when you make your next strategic plan, what that looks like and what you need. So so before I turn it over to Chris Burns to take it off, I just want to say our presentation is really 3 parts. It talks about a current snapshot of today, and then that's where we are, what our crime looks like, and then secondly, where we are projecting. And I hope none of you take from this a gloom and doom, because we tried to take just current crime rates, current estimations of population growth, and tried to keep it, basically without throwing in any bells and whistles. What does it look like in a few years? And then finally, what that looks like in terms of our deployment. And Mr. Esquivel said it best. Every department is going to come up and say, hey, we recommend this, that, or the other. But with PD, 86% of our budget is personnel. It just is. It goes between 86 and 88%. So really, if I'm asking for something, it's usually, or recommending something, it's usually attached to a body. So on that, just remind you, the last year and a half that I've been here, this council has been exceedingly gracious about fixing a communication system, getting me body worn cameras, making sure my officers had the best vests, the best cameras, the best equipment. We are a department that has really, really good stuff, and we are ready to go with the operation and maintenance that you provided. And I would also say thank you for your wisdom and guidance on requesting, hey, get 3 more officers to bolster up nights and to bolster up patrol, and we're in the process of working that. So with that, I will turn it over to Sergeant Chris Burns, who's gonna talk, and then pass it off to the other captains. And if you have any questions at any time of me, please just ask.
so I'll just talk loudly. All right, good evening, council, mayor, Mr. Esco, Ms. Spear. So today we're gonna be discussing long-range planning. I'm not as witty as Chief, and I'm not as good with humor, but we're gonna try to not make it death by PowerPoint, so we have little pictures and stuff in there, so that way it's not as boring. As long as you better fire with it, though.
I just want to know why he's wearing a bulletproof vest at the house.
You don't know who I live with.
What you say?
It's just who I live with, sir.
Oh.
All right, so like you said earlier, we're gonna discuss the snapshot of where we're at today, projections of where we may end up being in by 2025, so in about 3 years. And then what our long-range plan and recommendations of the police department already counter the changes that we're gonna have to the different projections.
Computer's right there.
Now you know why.
Now we know what Joe's at home.
What if I just pointed you?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
so do that. All right. So we're gonna start with the snapshot, where we're at today. So what you see here is this is our crime stats. We've done it since 2016 to measure it. It's actually a story of good news. As you can see, we are in a really good decrease in our overall crime stat right now. We'll start with violent crime, which is the one that gets the news the most, the one that worries most people. But when you see there, it's only 13% of our overall crime stat. That the rate is 3.8 victims per 1,000. And it is on a slight increase. It's up 9% from 2016. But when you're talking numbers of about 43 crimes reported per year, 9% could only be 2 to 3 crimes. This is our property crime. That is the bulk of what we deal with here in the city. This includes your thefts, your burglaries, your auto thefts, your burglaries of vehicles, the 4 that are measured here. This is the one that obviously is more common, accounts for the larger percentage. We only had 308 reported in 2021, which is an all-time low over the past 6-year period that we have shown here. With that, we are 23% below 2016. One of the things there's several things we do as a law enforcement agency to attempt to counter the different crime spikes and get in front of it. And the biggest one is what we do proactively. This is where we go out and search cars, we stop people who are in places they shouldn't be. We serve warrants on traffic stops. And one of the big ones, of course, everybody knows is drugs. Here, the orange line represents the rate of drug arrests that we have made since 2016. You'll see, I told you we'll have something flashing. You'll see that in 2016, we had made just about over 200, and then that number dropped significantly by 2019. During that same period, 2019 was our lowest drug arrest. It was actually one of the highest time periods that we had at the same time, which shows a negative correlation between your drug arrests and your crime rates. Some things to note here is that 2017 was the last year that we had a canine. You guys have granted us another canine. We're in the process of filling that position, so hopefully you'll see a nice increase from 2021 into the future. Another major thing that happened is Harris County has virtually decriminalized marijuana less than 4 pounds. That heavily affected the statistics as well, because marijuana, as we all know, will lead to, if you find marijuana in a car, there's a good chance you'll find other drugs. Now, our officers are still out there. They're still stopping cars, searching it, seizing the marijuana, writing the tickets for drug paraphernalia, which the courts allow us to do here. They're just not able to make the arrest, and therefore the statistics are a lot lower. And again, that shows the negative correlation. Drugs arrests go down, it's the same time that crime rates go up. So our highest period of crime, 2019, the last 5 years at 433, which is over 100 more than we've had now. And that was when we only made 78 arrests. Moving on to weapons, it's another proactive thing that we'll do. Our officers are going out there, they're finding illegal weapons, they're seizing these weapons and making arrests. This chart here shows the rate of arrests for our weapons. And you'll see again, it's the same negative correlation we have with drugs. In 2017, we have a peak in arrests, and the overall crime rate is down. 2019, we're not making as many weapons arrests, we're not taking as many off the road. Got a graphic up there to show on that one. So that's 2016. That's 1 gun for each weapon that we had seized that year. We only seized 9. 2019, the lowest one, we only had seized 7 weapons. We had 433 reported crimes, just like we had with our drug trade. In 2021, our officers were going out there and they were hitting the streets. Again, thank you for the extra coverage we had on night shift. And we were able to increase the arrests up to 27, which is 20.4%. I'm sorry, 300% above 2016, while the crime rates were 20.4% below 2016. So when the officers have that, yes, sir.
I'm sorry. What was going on in 2019 where we saw all these downtrends? You have an opinion on that?
Well, COVID was in 2020. The officers, I know that we were lower on staffing. They had less time to be proactive on night shift or on all shifts, but they make the arrests on all shifts. And the crime rate, when the crime rate's higher, it ties those officers' time down more. We'll cover that when we get to the patrol section of long range planning. But you'll see, and it goes over when you guys had the meeting about adding 3 officers. When we show the charts, that'll show proactive time is the ideal amount, 40%. If you're going down below 40%, your officers are responding to more and more calls. They're not finding the people before they commit the crimes. They're not finding the people, whenever they have the stolen property, so they continue to steal. So that's kind of what one of the major factors that plays into that. All right, so going over crime rates, what a crime rate, so we talked about crime statistics. What a crime rate is how we relate to other cities in the nation or in the state. So that'd be your 1 per 1,000 or however many per 1,000 you have. So for example, you can't compare us to New York. If we have 1 murder per, the 12,341 citizens in the US Census in 2020, that's a huge number to us, but in New York, they'll probably get 3, Baltimore especially, so that's how you compare across different regions to see if the murder rate is higher, look at the crime rate per 1,000. Well, we have 12,000 per the 2020 US Census, 12,341 citizens. Each one of those represents 200 people. And in 2021, we had 25 per 1,000 victims of property crime. And in 2021, we had 3.8, and that's a borderline where it should be, but 3.8 victims per 1,000 for violent crimes. These are good numbers. These are numbers that show you that living here, your odds of being victimized are significantly lower than maybe the news would show in Harris County, or maybe you have out in Houston. And of course, during the same period, really put it in perspective, that's how many people would eat Whataburger on any given day. And just so we can recognize Chief Burke from California, we did throw In-N-Out Burger in there too. Now, one of the more common things we do, of course, are traffic accidents, and that shows traffic accidents over time. You notice a huge drop in 2020. That was COVID. There was a couple months where we barely had any cars on the road. And in 2021, we had 786 reported traffic accidents. Of course, that number is lower than the previous year. So if you follow the trend line, we are decreasing from 2016 by 8%. With an increase in traffic, with the toll roads being built up, Grand Parkway coming through, may have helped because we diverted some traffic from what is our city, our jurisdictional limits. But at the same time, it increases the amount of traffic from 2920 going into the businesses, and yet we're still down in accidents. And a big part of that, we believe, is going to be your number of traffic stops. Again, just like your drugs and your weapons, it's a negative correlation. So when you have more traffic stops, you have less accidents, according to our statistics. And so you'll see in 2019, our lowest amount of traffic stops was one of our higher periods, not our highest, but it was one of our higher periods of accidents. And we've gone up significantly by 35% from 2016 traffic. So officers are out there, they're using that time they're allotted for proactive work to be able to target high traffic areas with a lot of accidents, make stops for hazardous violations to try to prevent those accidents, then of course, ideally fatality accidents as well. Also, during that proactive time, your night shift, there we go. Your night shift guys are arresting more DWIs over time as well. In fact, if you look, that's a huge increase. We had 180 arrests last year for DWI, and that's 143% increase from 2016. In fact, last year we had 3 officers recognized by the Mothers Against Drunk Driving for the number of DWI arrests that they made. And during that same period, we've had a few bars that have closed down. We've had some traffic slowed down from the bars. I mean, we've had a couple get built south of us and everything where the DWIs are coming from. But with less bars, they're out there and they're utilizing that time for what is one of the most time-intensive investigations. That's a 4-hour. You make that stop, that's a 4-hour investigation. Got to get blood draw search warrants. You're going to be going to court for most of them. So that the officers are dedicating a lot of time to get that number up to keep the streets safer. So aside from just obviously combating crime, traffic stops, and everything else, each of us carries ancillary duties. One of mine, for example, is making PowerPoints. So you heard me a lot of time with that. But here's a list of some of the other ancillary duties that our officers and employees do on a regular basis that ties up their time. That's just the ones that are most time intensive. Obviously, here and there, other things come up. So that's a summary of the snapshot of what our crime rates and our crime stats look like today. Now, of course, what does that mean for us moving forward? We got to look at projections. So everything for this section is based off of what we see, and we're just projecting into the future. So it could go one way or any way, and as we move forward. So first, we're going to go what we project as the growth. So according to the 2020 census, there were 4,369 households in the city of Tomball. Each household, again, according to the census, had 2.57 people that lived there. And with the expected growth of 2,200 homes, that would put it, and of course, when we say homes, we're not talking about the potential apartment complexes that we bring around the next 3 years, the businesses, the increase in our daytime traffic. That will take our population, which has a very steady increase of about 3,000 over the past 20 years. And it'll bring that increase to a sharp 18,000 people is what we're projecting based on the number of households plus the persons served per household in the US 2020 census.
What year is that?
That is, the chief asked me to put that in when he reviewed it, and I didn't put it in, but it's 2025 is what year we have for that, 17,995. And so that comes out to a 46% increase in the population. Right now, the Tomball Police Department has 52 sworn personnel positions of your officers. That is everything from the chief, includes your school resource officer, your captains, anybody who is certified through TICO. And based on that, if you look at the number of officers per, or number of citizens per officer, that's 237 citizens per officer. With the 46% increase in the population like we project, that would bring 5,654 more citizens, which would change that ratio to 346 per officer, which is 50% more than what we have now. And that would be the growth that you see. So again, we're going to project the crime. So what we do is if you take the crime rates, which is your 3.8 victims per thousand on violent and your 25 per thousand property crimes, and if we're going to say that those rates, which are good rates, those remain constant over 5,500 or 5,600 additional citizens, that would bring our crime rates up to record levels where they haven't been before. Violent crime, property crime, both being well above where we're at now. And keep in mind that's based on 2021's numbers, which are lower than they've been in the past 6 years. So that'd be 450 reported crimes a year with 69 violent crimes in a year. We're at 43 right now for 2021. So a snapshot of what that looks like is we project 5,654 more residents, and if crime rates remain constant, then that would be 163 additional crimes each year by 2025. 22 of those crimes are violent crimes. Your violent crimes are murders, your sexual assaults, your aggravated assaults, and your robberies. That's 22 more victims who are residents of the city, 22 people that you know, that you work with, somebody's mom or grandmother or father that become victims of these robberies and these aggravated assaults. 141 victims, additional victims of your property crimes. So you get your high school teenagers who are just trying to make ends meet, working a part-time job, coming out to find the catalytic converter stolen, or your business owner reports everything in life savings, the business up and running, and they come over and find the window broken and everything stolen from it. So that's what we're using for our projections as we move forward into our long-range plan for what we recommend the police department has. Captain Patan is going to go ahead and introduce that.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Next slide, please. All right, the current layout of the Tomball Police Department results on 2 divisions right now. The patrol side of the division, which under their branches off to patrol, community relations, and support services. The other side also branches off to the investigations division. It has the criminal investigation division and the student resource officer with the contract for Tomball Independent School District. As we look on what we currently have here, we have a day shift on patrol, an evening shift, and a night shift watch. In there, we also have a K9, which has already been branded. We are still waiting for the car from the factory to get here, and then we'll be up and running with that. 2 motorcycles, which make up the motorcycle unit that are used for special events, parades, and an air support unit. On the support service side, which is dispatch, which consists of 9 dispatchers, which work 12-hour shifts apiece. Jail, which comes under 3 jailers, and our records division under 2 records clerks. Next slide. Next slide. Currently, the current officer average workday, basically what this means, the Tomball police officers currently work 10-hour shifts each day. 10% of their time on average is spent on duties such as jail, booking, arrest, reports, etc. What that means is every time we arrest somebody, we have to go to a call for service and take a report from someone, we are taking a good amount of time to build a rapport with that individual, listen to them very clearly and not just show the public, we're here, give me your information and get out of here. We want to create a rapport with the public, with the community. So therefore, it is taking some time when we visit with these individuals to get the reports done. 22% of the time represents relief factor, such as training. We've got to send individuals to training annually to get their current training hours to hold their state certification. Vacation, we ask that everybody takes vacation, use their time, although a lot of people do give it back. FMLA, light duty, and sick time represents that category. Now, the pie chart on the left, 28% is calls for service, while other duties, report of jail, reports, etc., as we talked about. Proactive time. Proactive time is what we consider going out there, making those traffic stops, looking for the individuals that are not doing what they're supposed to, getting the crime off the street along with the narcotics. The 40% of proactive time comes from the Texas Police Chiefs Association, which is a national model that's used out here. Staffing models are based on providing significant staffing to meet the citizens' generated calls for service. Such as, average right now, we have about 4, sometimes 5 officers on the street per shift at a time to take calls. Now, that is full staff there, not with no vacation or FMLA or whatever the case may be. So on a good day, that's what it means. The remaining time is allowed to proactive work such as community engagement, crime missions, traffic stops, and drug interdiction. One of the big ones up there is community engagement. We spend time where we send our officers out to engage with the community, whether it's a parade, a special event at the depot, or even adopting businesses that we can go out and say, okay, I know this business, Mr. So-and-so owns it, Miss So-and-so is the manager. These are their employees. That's how we get a good rapport with the community. Next slide, please. Based on that model, we don't want to be like agencies such as your bigger ones, your HPDs, other agencies like that, that just have you chasing radio calls. If you just chase radio calls all the time, you don't have time for the community engagement and the proactive service. If the calls for service increase at the same rate as the population projects, the increase would reduce proactive time to only 22%. Therefore, we would be chasing the radio calls nonstop versus being able to do our community engagement and proactive stuff. Next slide. The Tomball Police Department currently has 23 patrol officer positions. That's what's broke down between the 3 10-hour shifts that we have of days, evenings, and nights. Based on the Texas Police Chiefs Association staffing model, the Tomball Police Department recommends 31 patrol officers to meet the projected calls for service to increase in the future. That's based off the staffing analysis that we did by the Texas Police Chiefs Association. This would put us up to be able to still do our proactive community engagement. Along with that, sending people to training along there. Next slide. Chris.
All right, so this is we're gonna get down and dirty of a staffing model. You guys have seen the number one, the more boring one last year when we asked for the 3 additional officers. This is where we're at with the 3 additional officers. So what's important to see here, so first of all, the orange line, that's our calls for service. It's an average for that hour over a 6-year period. And then the little, there's supposed to be little policemen, I don't know if you can see where they're at, but that's, each one of those represents one officer that on average works during that hour. And that includes your relief factor, so when they're off on vacation, sick time, et cetera. And we, with the 23 you had given us, we meet the minimum staffing of 4 officers at any given time. As of right now, we're still filling some of those spots. It does take about 10 months to hire and train an officer and have them on the streets though. So we're still working to meet the 23. The minimum staffing, the part highlighted in orange, is the basis for a staffing model. And you've got to make sure that you have adequate staffing during all times of the day. So you see there's a huge dip at between 4 and 5 a.m. in our calls for service. You still don't want to drop your officers down during that period because those calls could be your fatal accidents, your major DWIs. We have 2 officers who are still working at DWI from midnight. You're tying up your staffing that way. So you always want to have adequate staffing across the board. You see that there's, and we're meeting the 4 minimum staffing. You see the blue right there represents the changeover in the shifts. We're working 10-hour shifts where there's more than, there's not 30 hours in a day. So there's 6 hours that the shifts overlap. We try to target the higher crime, higher accident, and higher call for service periods. So that way we can saturate the streets during those times to help combat any spikes that we do happen to see. That's our current staffing model with 23 officers. With the projections added to the model, you can see in the orange area, that is the possible increase that we'd see if we keep with the 46% that we'd see in the population increase. And you can see that the gaps between the officers and the call for service starts to get more broad. If we were to get to 31 officers, as Kevin Patan had mentioned, then we could reallocate officers to better match that, the calls for service chart. We actually increased our night shift staffing to 5 officers. At no point do we drop below that. And our lowest point, we have 5 officers, again, including your relief factors of officers on vacation, sick time, et cetera. And we'd be able to better match that chart.
Chris, what's happened to 0 hours? I noticed on every one of these, you don't have midnight. You have 2,300, but you don't go to midnight. You go from 2,300 to 100.
Yes, no, so I didn't, and what it looks like, you see from 23, it goes way up to 1, it's probably a steady increase. But no, that's just a mistake on my side.
No, that's fine. I just, because you have a discrepancy in, at 2,300 is shorter than 100. So there's a discrepancy there in the amount of potential crime.
You know,
Okay.
call for service, yes, and after watching that 100 times, and I've not seen that, so it says something.
Sorry.
Still better than fire, we'll have more times.
Careful.
The ideal staffing model mimics your calls for service. So you have officers working some swing shifts. You have 2 or 3 that come in at 9 a.m., for example, and then get out a little bit earlier, but then that way you're able to better mimic the call for service. So that would be kind of what an ideal staffing model would look like if we end up moving up to 31 officers, where that way you can maintain that 40% proactivity across all hours of the day. Because if we just threw the officers evenly across the board, you'd have more officers on night shift than you have calls for service, and they'd have 80% proactivity, and your evening shift guys would be going call to call to call. And it's important because if we're getting those calls at those times, the crimes are happening at those times, we want to be stopping these people before they commit the crimes. And we want to have officers who are available to go ahead and catch it beforehand.
Next slide. Next slide. Okay. Community Relations Division under patrol. This is a new unit that was started by Chief Burke when he got here to create a Community Relations Division that dedicates a lot of time with community engagement. The Community Relations Unit participates in a list of events all year long, including Holiday Heroes, National Night Out, Explorers, hotel manager meetings, Special Olympics, and MAD statewide initiatives. The Community Relations Division is built up of one individual right now, but we all pitch in to help. What this means from a standpoint of a Community Relations Division is that the days of knowing everybody in our city are, you used to know everybody. There's so many people moving here from out of state, relocating here from all over the United States. I mean, right now within such a growing area, we're actually seeing applicants who are applying with the Tomball Police Department coming out of numerous states through the United States that have certifications from those states that are moving here. So we're going to have new engagement. What I'm trying to say is, if this individual over here moved from out of state of Washington and this person moved over here from Wisconsin, we're not gonna know them. The only way we're gonna know them is community engaging them, such as events we have, welcoming them into our city. With a projected population growth of 5,654, the citizens of the Tomball Police Department has a need for a robust community relations unit. What that means is this unit of one individual right now is gonna have to grow. It's gonna have to grow over time to keep the community engagement going. That's what keeps the good rapport with us and the city. Next slide. What? That's it.
No, this is next slide.
Oh, next slide.
Okay.
Oh, I apologize. With the growing change population in Tomball, we recommend expanding the community relations unit to include a community relations officer and one community relations specialist. What that means is one officer, one civilian, working hand in hand with the sergeant they have right now to build the division and the rapport.
Isn't that what our VIP program was about at one point in time?
Yes, sir, it was.
And what is the status on that currently?
The VIP program, I can tell you at this time, it went down bad during COVID, sir. And a lot of our volunteers that were around here have not returned and not wanted to return since COVID. We have talked about engaging for the future when people feel comfortable. We want to bring back some engagement such as the Citizens Police Academy, sir, to engage with them and try to build it back up. But everybody we have from the VIPs that were here every day, they've either moved out of state, had complications, or have just not wanted to return.
So we don't have anybody working VIPs at this time?
No, sir.
No officers involved other than the one sergeant? Okay, thank you.
Okay. As you see on the chart, this would put a community relations officer and a community relations specialist under the organizational chart of community relations on my side of patrol. Next slide. Captain Dory.
Mayor, council, how are y'all? Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come up here and talk a little bit about our investigations, where we're at, where we would like to go based on projections that Chris has done, and where we see the growth that we see coming to the community. And what I just first like to say is, department-wide, we've always had the ability to really do more than a lot of other cities our size do. It's one, because y'all being gracious enough to give us what we need. But two, it's just always been kind of our philosophy. I mean, you file a case, you're gonna get a phone call. You know, we do our best to follow up on everything that we can. And again, it's because we have the latitude to do that based on our call load, based on our equipment, things like that, where a lot of your agencies like a Harris County or HPD or Austin or San Antonio, just by sheer numbers, they just don't have the time to do it. So it is a good place to work, and you know, we get a lot of things done. But mine will be kind of two parts. I'll talk a little bit about basic investigations because my division is broke down into two sides. The second side, we'll talk a little bit about the SRO and training and that side of it. But I have 4 investigators assigned to investigations, 1 sergeant and myself. Caseload is everything from a misdemeanor all the way up the scale. Something as simple as a shoplifting to a homicide. We're not big enough for someone to truly specialize in homicide or property crimes or crimes against children or sexual crimes or whatever, like a larger agency that has the manpower to do that. So everybody across the board, while they do have their specialty, they still work, you know, alongside with each other, and they handle, you know, pretty much everything that comes across their plate. So with inside criminal investigations, we do general investigations, which is kind of what we just spoke about. You have the 4 investigators based off of projections. If we do increase by 46% within the next number of years, then that's going to require at least one additional investigator to help cover the caseload that that's going to generate. What I would like to see added to the division is an internet crimes against children and cyber crimes investigator. We live right outside Houston, which is one of the biggest areas for crimes against children, prostitution, trafficking, and things like that. So don't think that it doesn't spill over into our city. So to go back to a full-time ICAC investigator, something that maybe you do know, maybe you don't know, Jason Smith, which was an investigator, promoted out to a sergeant a couple of years ago, handled ICAC on a part-time basis. In a 2-year period, filed 63 cases for solicitation online. Was recognized by not only our DA's office, but Harris County DA's office for the work that he was able to do. Task force, something that we have not participated in a number of years. It is a task force. There is money out there for auto theft task force. You know, Harris County, HPD, most of your larger agencies have somebody that we could partner with. And that is, you know, when I say auto theft, that's anything from burglary of a motor vehicle to theft of a catalytic converter to anything related to property crime against the vehicle. But really just a task force operator and in whatever capacity we see that person is best fit. The last would be a juvenile investigator. And I'll get to that in a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about the SRO side, the student resource officer side, the increase that we've seen in reportable crime coming from the schools and just how that school is probably going to be built out over the next couple of years. You're going to need that slide as well.
Ricky, before you go on, let me just ask you a question. Does it make our officers more valuable to us that they are cross-trained in all of these investigative type situations versus somebody coming out of, say, a Houston or a Harris County or any other large city where they specialize and don't really know how to do the other things? Does it make it harder for us to get officers from these other agencies?
Hands down, it makes a better investigator. Now, if you truly have a major crime scene and you were able to tap into that resource, that maybe that's all that officer does is handle murders. Are they going to be a little bit more experienced at doing that? But across the board with what we dealing with, you know, a murder every other year or something like that, most definitely, because, you know, while fraud is a big crime for us, and David White is your specialist on that, they all cross-train across that board, as well as from property crimes to profit. So yes, it does. It makes it much more diverse investigation. Did we switch it? Clearance rate. Talk a little bit about clearance rate for murder, robbery, aggravated assault. Our staffing, do we need to click that? Yeah. Chris actually compared us to Harris County. It's closest agency to us, big agency to us, and did a 1-year comparison is what he did. So when we look at murders, we actually did not have a murder in 2021, but we had one in 2020. That case was listed as an aggravated assault, and the victim did not pass until a later date. So when the case was cleared, it was cleared in 21. So we had a 100% clearance rate in that when you compare this to Harris County, which, you know, from a robbery standpoint, you know, we cleared 45% of our robbery. That's one of the most violent crimes that you have. Sexual or aggravated assaults were at 93%, and then sexual assaults we were at 100%. Please understand, read the bottom of that when it says clearance rates are based on arrest, decline of prosecution, victim refusal, and case proven to be unfounded. So there's a lot of things that played into when we say we have 100% clearance rate in our sexual assault crimes out there. We do have cases that are declined by the DA's office. We do have from time to time where a victim recants or says, I don't want to pursue this. We are very good at pursuing and filing the charges, and then some are just proven to be unfounded.
Captain, real quick, just to clarify, though, is that our clearance rates are high too, because we do follow up on every single one. What adds to the other agencies is sometimes they take so long to get to a case, and that's why they don't get cleared.
Sure, without a doubt. I mean, Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, if I could jump in on that one. Just from personal experience, I'm sergeant over investigations. Whenever we refer cases, it goes through my office. I reach out to the sergeant over the other cases. And to put in perspective what Harris County is dealing with, we talk about the auto theft task force. For example, we have on a bad day for us, we had 3 BMVs. And that's a high number for us. They get 16 per detective per day. So what they do, the sergeant takes them and he goes through the ones, okay, unknown suspect, nope, unknown suspect, nope, and they don't even look at them. They don't call the victim, they don't call anybody. That case is gone and over with. They only take the ones, the small 10% that they can actually solve in a reasonable amount of time. Because 116 per day starts getting to a really, really big number, and your detectives become overburdened. Even with cases like sexual assault, you will never catch at this point in time a on-ball detective not doing everything in their absolute power to investigate sexual assault. But we've had one where we got the DNA from a case, a sexual assault, proved, identified the person, charged them on our end, reached out to HPD's sex crimes division, said, hey, you got DNA hit from a CODIS is what it's called. We found out that the DNA you pulled from your victim matches this DNA on this suspect who we've identified as that prosecuted and convicted. Here's your case. And I go, we never signed that to anybody. And so it still took the detective hounding their department, detective contacting their department for a couple months before they did assign a case with an identified big suspect on an unknown stranger rape case. So we don't, every case goes to us.
Ricky, can I jump in?
You're spying on me. Go ahead.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just to the board, because clearance rates, I don't want there to be any confusion for council or really anybody. The clearance rates are, as it's defined on the screen, in arrest, decline, prosecutions, victim refusals, all those, that's a standardized, that isn't Tomball clearance rate definition. That's FBI's definition of a clearance rate, as uniform crime reporting allows us to clear a case by a certain definition. And Ricky and Chris are right. This is not because we've got amazing detectives and Harris County doesn't. I think there are probably great cops there too. I know there are, but nationally, auto theft and burglary from vehicle clearance rates are between 3% and 4%. They're just abysmal because in big cities, people just don't have the time to work on it. So our 36% clearance rate in auto theft is really remarkable. And it's remarkable because the day, within a few hours after it's happening, a detective is calling the victim and it's starting in that golden hour. So that really is, I just wanted to be clear, there's no fanciness here. It's just, we have fewer numbers and we're able to dedicate people immediately to them. And I want to keep it that way. So.
And I guess that's why I want to make sure that when we present this information that we are absolutely transparent and so you understand that what this means. And when we talk about the recommendations on moving forward, it's to maintain these levels of service. And so there is an adjustment there to be made too, but that's again, the question that would be posed to the council.
This is just following up on the burglary, auto theft, and theft clearance rate as well. And Chief kind of noted on auto theft. I mean, when you steal a vehicle, a lot of times you have no suspect, nothing to track unless maybe you've got some type of tracking device on the truck. You track these vehicles, you find where they've been strapped out. You do the best that you can. In this type of case, may close several months later. You know, maybe you're fortunate enough to stop it in the traffic stop once it's left the city. But a lot of times you have no suspects. You're just building a case off of a video, off of a license plate or something. So to have a 36% clearance rate in that, would do very well. Yeah, this should show our stats for 21 and then projected for 25. And this again is based on Texas Police Chiefs Associated detective staffing model. And as Chris had said, we're projecting a 46% increase in population, which is going to lead to an increase in crime as well, whatever that may be. But going off the model, it's probably going to be close to 46% as well. So adding one detective, when I say one detective, that's just a general detective. That's not taking into consideration the ICAC investigator, the juvenile investigator, or the task force. That's just one detective to work general crimes. And you can see last year we had 15 sexual assaults, robberies 11, ag assault 6, and on down the line 341 reportable UCR crimes. That's what that stands for. Now we're projecting we'll be up to 498, might as well say 500, and look at the man hours that it's going to take to investigate those types of cases. So as you know, city manager said it, if we want to stay at the same level that we're at, we're going to have to add to just basic investigations. Yes.
Just to clarify, because that number is higher than what you saw in the general crime stats, we included other violent and other property crimes as well, which aren't the ones in the general crime stats. So, you know, it's your vandalisms aren't FBI reported numbers. For some of the violent crimes, your family violence, regular assault is actually not reported to the FBI. So we still investigate those, but that's why that's why that number is higher than what you saw in the original crime stats, because of those two sections.
So Chris and Ricky, y'all have said that currently we have 23 officers, patrol officers, I guess. 31 is what y'all are anticipating that we're going to need by the year 2030 or 2025, correct?
Yes.
Are those correct numbers? So
Correct.
you're talking about 18, a difference of 18 officers, correct?
No.
8.
Eight, my bad, 8 officers. I
We'll
did
get to the
upside
rest
down.
of the 18 when we get to SROs.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I was doing it upside down.
And the reason that we say a 46% increase, the reason we're not asking for a 46% increase in staffing is because while you might add the amount of work hours they put per case or for officers for calls for service, your relief factors don't actually change. That's your vacation. We're going to assume that on average, and I don't have any way of projecting increase in vacation. So on average, they'll take the same number of vacations per officer, or for detectives, they'll have the same amount of vacation, same amount of training per detective. That's why we're not saying 46% in staffing. We're basing it on the models that the TPCA has recommended for staffing.
With the stress level that you gentlemen and ladies also are involved with, I am very, very shocked to hear you say you allow people to give back or vacation time.
It's not really allowing them to give back. It's basically, we do our best to encourage them to use their time. There are people who choose not to use all their time, and they do end up giving time back.
So how does that affect in the stress that you guys in your profession? Because let's face it, y'all probably have one of the most stressful, if not the most stressful, other than maybe the military, who are in active duty, of any of our servants. Is there any way you can say, guys, you're going to take your vacation time, even if it's just something to settle yourselves down, go home, break away from it, stay away from it? Can y'all mandate that anyway?
I've never really asked the question.
I can answer that. So what Lisa does every year, several times a year, Lisa Coe and HR sends out a list of, it's called use or lose time. And we all have, we all know, hey guys, I can list them off. I mean, one of the guys that is always high up and doesn't take all his time is talking to you right now at the podium. So the point is that there are people that in spite of they just build up their time, and I suppose I could order them, hey, you got to go home and take it off. But I always try and encourage folks and just make sure we build up enough time and throughout the year, because what we can't have is in December 15th, have the entire department say, oh my gosh, I've got to burn 15 days of vacation and then have nobody for the Christmas holidays. So it is a balance. And I think our city model, Lisa's office, HR does a really good job of just that constant reminder. And then Ricky on his side and detectives and Brandon on his side and patrol, make sure that people are trying to take their time. But even that said, Councilman, we have a handful of people that give back time every year that they just don't use it. But I would say it's not for lack of us offering them. I have never ordered anybody to go home.
That is something, I mean, just the investigative side and patrol side as well. We ask our guys to start scheduling the vacation, January through July, half of it then, and then try to burn the rest of the half.
Yeah.
With some staffing issues over the last couple of years and some other things like that. There's been some issues with some people taking time. It's not because we denied time, it's just because they didn't ask for the time. Lisa puts an updated list out once a month. That's telling us where we're at on use or lose is what it's called. So.
I have a question on your stats. You had said we have 12,341 and 52 people, and we have 52 officers, and that's 237 citizens per officer. If we're just adding 8 more till 2025, that means that it's 300. 18,000 is what we're projected. And now we have just 8 more officers. So each officer is responsible for 300 citizens. Is that an acceptable stat? How does that compare to other places? That just seems like we're giving them a lot more people to take care of, and that doesn't seem enough, 8 officers, to be honest.
So what you're gonna see at the end of this is we're actually, so the 52, that includes the chief, the captains, SROs, and that is sworn. So if we had a situation here, which is highly unlikely in Tomball, but we'll say if we had a situation where we do have civil unrest or something, that's how many officers we have that can stand on the line, 52. By the end of this, you're gonna see you got the 8 for patrol, but then you got the detectives he's asking for, you got the additional SROs. Whenever you get the number of the final officers, it actually comes out to about 8 citizens off from that one. And these numbers are based on all the different TPCA models and everything. So it plays out perfectly. You know, I think it's 247, 246 citizens per officer in the final request.
Okay, because that seems like that should be an increase of 26
To
more. in
answer
the
your
3 years.
question, that's 8 people for patrol that would deal with citizens on a regular basis. You
Okay.
have an additional SRO investigator and things like that. But like Chris is saying, when you figure all that in, then it brings us back up close to that 245 mark.
That's 24 increase for the next 3 years, 8 per patrol. Is that correct? Okay, that
8
makes
per
more
patrol
sense.
plus
That brings
another.
it back to the
Yeah, it's broken
230.
down. It's broken down in 3 different phases: patrol, investigations, and SRO.
Okay, good.
Okay.
And also, do you have any statistics about how our Air Force fits in on the cost of the Air Force, and how many of these caseloads and things that you've done is that there? I call it the Air Force.
No, you're-
Air support has
What do you
benefited
say, Air
from.
Force? Wow.
I can talk on that, Brandon.
Chief's not got it.
I mean,
Yep.
say, there's no cost to, there's no dollar amount that you can put on the life. If it saves one life, it saves a life. But
No,
I was
yeah.
just wondering how many times that has been called in to help locally and in the county.
Okay, ma'am. I can answer that for the last year and a half. I hope, ma'am, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we did look at that in the last year and a half, and when air support flew, they would do a daily log, and when you really drill down into the log, we didn't have there was not a lot of support and assistance in terms of solving a crime, like getting on a stolen vehicle fast enough, or locating burglaries. There were about 4 instances in the last 2 years where they were able to help set perimeters. One in Cherry Pines most recently, where it was because of the airship, we were able to see a guy running through the fences and able to locate him. So we've had some pretty big incidents, but really only 4 that stand out in the last, I've only been here, about a little over a year and a half since then. So the challenge I was facing, ma'am, is I'm looking at kind of why we initially had an air support unit in Harris County when this started under Chief Hauk. There weren't helicopters around. There were no other pilots. We really did provide a great benefit for the county and a great, I would say one of the impetuses for the county to build up their own air support unit. And they've done that. Now we have DPS and we have Harris County that are flying more helicopters, faster helicopters, and just have a more robust program. Meanwhile, I was able to put in, train a second officer when one retired. So we had 2 pilots, but the majority of their time, as they were learning, was spent being tactical flight officers for the county. And at some point, their logs, they were doing good stuff. It wasn't in Tomball for the most part. And I really have to, when I look at this in balance, if I get a K9 officer and a K9 unit, 99% of that time, that dog and that officer are going to be in Tomball on Tomball crimes. And I was under 60, I was at about, between 30 and 40% of the amount of time that I had my officers, they were actually in Tomball, working Tomball issues. And that's not a slight on them. It was great for a relationship. It just didn't become cost effective at the end. And so I still have a qualified pilot. I still have an airship, but the final piece of this is the other aspect of economy is the airship itself. That gyrocopter, when we bought those, were between $50,000 and $60,000, and another $20,000 to outfit some of the forward-looking infrared that doesn't work very well, and the radios, etc. A new gyrocopter is $250,000 to $270,000, and we are within a year and a half of having to replace the one we have. So I'm trying to balance, maybe in a year and a little over 18 months, I've got 4 radio calls that I could say they were instrumental in helping us get a suspect or locate somebody, versus that much money, that much risk, and that much time for 2 officers. And that's where I am right now, Councilman, on that.
Thank you.
And so just to sum up, so far we're 8 patrol and how many investigating? Reese? Is it just 1 or is it 4?
No, it would be 4.
4, okay.
It would be 4.
Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
And how much is the benefit if we did not have an air patrol and more went into an extra K9 unit? What's the cost of officer with the K9 unit? We're getting 1, but if we had 2.
Let me see if Chief wants to answer that. or
Yeah,
not.
ma'am, K9 out the door, a car is about $62,000. A K9 unit is between $17,000 and $19,000 to train an officer and get a K9. So it's just to get a dog in the ground is with a car is $80,000 to $90,000, almost $100,000. And then that also takes an officer largely out of a patrol function. He or she, whoever becomes a K9 operator, will be responding to very particular calls and traffic calls, but they're not going to be going to your domestic violence. They're not going to be handling the neighbor dispute or taking a theft at Walmart. So I really think to come at this conservatively, let's see how we do with 1. Let's see if we get our money, because it is an expensive, and investment with some risk associated with it. You know, that we have a dog, we have a trainer. Dogs are expensive. Dogs get sick. Dogs sometimes bite people, and we have to balance all that. So I would love to start with 1 and see how we do as a city. We have a good model. We've done it before, and we were extremely successful. I just think the wisdom would be to start with 1, ma'am.
Thank you.
How much of your budget is directed at the air operations support? How much dollar-wise?
Sir, I'd have to look that up. I apologize. I don't have that in front of me. I'll get you those statistics.
I have a question. In relation to the air support, would there be a benefit for a drone capacity instead of an airship?
Yes, sir. In fact, your city council, you all approved us to, that was part of our budget package. We have just bought, and I think I just have to sign off on them. We bought 2 drones, and we've identified between 5 and 6 trainers, and those drones will be traffic reconstruction, searching. They've got infrared capability. So the only thing they can't do is fly inside and do an indoor crime scene. But beyond that, they can search, they can do perimeter, they can do all those things. And to answer your question for searching for a lost child, searching for a suspect, that will be, we can get it up within a couple minutes versus 20 minutes from hooks to get, taxi out. And that's if the 2 officers are working. So yes, it'll be a 24-hour operation, and 2 drones ended up costing us, it'll be about $20,000 out the door with all the officer training and software and iPads to go with it.
While we're on the subject about air support, here's what you need to think about. Hooks Airport's 10 minutes away. Harris County Air Support and all their tactical unit is out there. That's a phone call. DPS is out there with their full air support, with their helicopters and things. That wasn't there. We did share with Harris County when they implemented their air support unit. They built that out to 3 helicopters, a fixed wing. You got DPS who has helicopters and fixed wing now. And to answer your question about the drone program, we're in the process of building that out right now. So yeah, I do think the drones will be a very good program for us. Okay, cyber crimes, according to the U.S. Department of Health, Human Resources, Texas is ranked number 2. Imagine this, Houston is ranked number 1, in the state of Texas. We're right outside of Houston. The statewide human trafficking map shows that Texas has about 300,000 victims of human trafficking, to include about 79,000 juveniles, forced to participate in a number of sex trafficking. So when we're talking about internet crimes against children and having somebody to investigate that, and then to move more so into the cyber type crimes as well, the online solicitation, the online prostitution, a lot of other things that is taking place out of our hotels as we speak, most likely. Next slide.
I can interchange it.
Oh, did you? Okay. No, we just went over this one. I did. What's the next slide?
That's an actual prostitution advertisement that she specifically listed Tomball's area she's advertising for alcohol.
Okay. You can find that day in and day out. Talk a little bit about the task force in general. We may be small, but surrounded by the 4th largest city in the United States, 3rd most populated county. Collaborate with outside agencies is crucial to combat crime trends that originate outside Tomball but affect our city. You go to the next one. We've done this for years. We have to work with larger agencies. Some of our larger narcotics busts, things that we've been in, have been with DEA, has been with HPD. We worked very closely with Harris County and also HPD on a lot of major things. Detectives work daily with surrounding agencies to solve Tomball problems, but a task force could bring more direct relationship. So I do think that that's a benefit as well. Having the task force, having somebody assigned to the task force, not only the cases that you're working, but the intel that you get from what's traveling through your city. It may not all impact your city, but it's the surrounding area that we all live and travel in, and we find out the intel that's going on out there. Yes. Juvenile crimes. On average, or last year, we had 17 runaway reports that we took. When you take a runaway report, in general, when you're dealing with juveniles, it's just a lot more labor intensive than it is when you're dealing with your normal report. There's information you have to keep private. There's ways that you have to track it down. We partner very closely with school districts on getting information. Every runaway report gets assigned in a timely manner, and it gets an investigator assigned to it to will track that juvenile down and ultimately get that juvenile recovered in close proximity to our city or in the city to do a home visit to make sure that that child's okay. Okay, increase in offensive and involving juveniles in 21 from 20 to 21, we went up by 48 cases. Part of that is most likely because school in general in 2020 was down due to COVID. So the increase in that, runaways, sexual assaults that have been reported from juveniles and crimes such as that. Next slide. Percentage of cases involving children that require follow-up. 43% of the cases that are juvenile related require a follow-up versus 27% of the other cases that we get. And again, if you're taking a runaway case, if you're taking anything that's you know, school related, whatever it might be, sexual related, you've got quite a bit of follow-up that you do with juveniles. And the last one. And then projected would be an additional 32 cases. Is that correct?
The SROs take on average 32 of their own cases each semester. That's
Okay.
in the schools alone.
What type of cases are those typically, Chris?
Those range from your runaway cases, assaults on campus, drugs on campus, sexual assaults, they'll get those. Indecency cases, like indecency with a child. I mean, it's any case you can see in the public, but you got a juvenile victim or a juvenile suspect, and those you got to deal with way differently than you would with an adult, because they've got different rights and adults do different protections, both for suspects and for victims.
So is that 32 cases above and beyond the 48 that we're talking about there?
No,
But that's, the 48 includes those 32 cases?
correct. Yes,
Okay, okay.
That's just from the schools alone.
Now, when we're talking about 32 additional reports, they're taking the reports because they have the rapport with the kids. They're there, the investigators for the most part, anything felony and above, where it's a sexual or a major assault or something like that, the investigators are working that. They may partner, and a lot of times they do partner with the SRO because they know the students and they know, you know, a lot of times who's involved and things like that. They have access to information that we typically don't. Okay. We talked about that. We'll talk a little bit about training SRO, and you moving quick on me.
Oh, that's me. It's set up.
It does that way?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to explain what this is then, because you didn't give me time.
So what you've got here, this orange line, 2017 through the 2021 statistics were from TISD's website where they're reporting TEA on the number of students they have there. From there, it's all projections. And it's supposed to, Chief told me probably 20 times to change the color. You know, it's projection, no factual, but it slipped my mind just like the 12 o'clock hour. So the numbers that we have for the projections, that's a 9% increase in the population. They had projected between, and Chief, you correct me if I'm wrong, between 12 and 15, and ended up being lower than that. And so we kind of averaged out what they projected, what the actual growth is, and it came out to 9%. We just extended that through 2025.
Chris, so TISD believed they were going to have a 6% growth with students this year in the last school year, according to Dr. Steve Gutierrez in charge of operations. They have experienced a 12% growth of students in just 1 year. So literally 22,500 students now in TISD and growing at about a 9 to 12% rate. So honestly, Chris's projections are modest.
Okay, what this represents is, correct me if I'm wrong, the bar across there is number of students per number of SROs.
It's the number, if you look at the right side of the graph, 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, that's the number of SROs. So we got the historic up to current numbers, It shows we had 5 SROs assigned to the school districts through 2020. In the fall semester 2020, we had our first big jump in the number of SROs whenever we outlined, hey, we are way behind the national standard of 1 per 1,000 students. They ended up giving us 3 additional SROs, and we got 1 more this past year in 2021 for the fall semester. They opened in Grand Lakes Junior High. And the orange, that is what the NASRO recommendation of 1 per 1,000 would look like if we match that number.
Yes.
Doesn't the school fund about 70% of that officer?
75%.
No,
70.
70.
70-30 split. And what that 70-30 is, that's only salary and benefits.
Right.
That
We
doesn't
do
take
the
into
training.
consideration overtime, cars, maintenance, fuel, training. It's only salary based, salary and benefit based, 70-30 split.
So why are we getting the short end of the stick?
We've been on a contract for 70-30 since we initiated the program, from what I understand.
And that was in the year of what? 2012, 2011.
Actually, well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was an SRO 20 years ago,
Mhm.
so in 97.
So,
So if you want to go back to 97, but what this goes back to 2017, it's always been a 70-30 split. I will say that we have had a meeting with school district last year about salary and benefits and increasing. We've met again this year, and there's an additional meeting set up in the near future to say, look, 70-30, we're gonna have to discuss this to see where we're at.
they keep raising our school taxes. By goodness, they ought to be paying for their own, for the security that's there, period.
I understand.
So from what I understand, and we looked at these different financial models, and I've talked to Chief about how we move forward. It was a benefit to have the SRO program and have those SRO officers, because when the school was out, we were the beneficiary of having those officers then be able to utilize them for other things in the city. And so we are reaching that point that when you have that many SROs coming off of that time, what are we going to utilize them for? And so it's now gotten it was absolutely a tremendous benefit to have the SRO program for ourselves, just in operations, because when school was out, we could then put them on the streets. Now having those sheer numbers of SROs coming back to us, we have to look at a different model, because just the sheer number hitting us during those off-school months, we need them more course of the entire year, not just that month. And so those numbers that's why we need to look at this model differently.
Right. Councilman Townsend, this is.
Yes, sir.
This is Jeff. Looking so Ricky and I, this year and last year, we've met with them, but we also met with TISD, but we've also met with surrounding agencies. And there's two bars we're looking at, factors we're looking at. Number one, we're looking at cost per officer. What is the ratio that a school pays? That's at one bar. And right now we're at 70-30. You might be surprised to find out that the last 5 contracts we looked at in Harris County were also 70-30 splits. I have the MOUs on my desk. They are 70-30. The difference is the county, Harris County, and they don't pay for cars either. The difference is the county is so big that they can absorb, hey, we're gonna get more cops in the school. They take old cars that they're not gonna use anymore and they dump them over there. We're just too small to have that much wiggle room, and we need to have a little more finesse, I think, as a smaller city. And so that ratio, it doesn't make economic sense after a while, because like David said, at a 70-30 split, every 3 SROs, the city itself is paying for another cop and paying for another car. And it's it starts adding up. So we really do have to look at other models, and there are other models out there. There's 2 that come to mind right now to look at the models. One is look at part-time officers. As the chief of police, I'm against having an officer who works 70% of the year and isn't invested in the city of Tomball, is just an SRO, And I don't really have that, can't give him or her the mission, vision, values the same way we can talk about every single day in our department. The second model is something that Ricky brought up, is that if it becomes too big, we already have an 84 square mile footprint for TISD. Then we maybe consider, okay, we'll only do the schools that are in the city of Tomball. There are other models, and we have to measure them. The intangibles, though, the relationship with the students, I can't put a price on that. I can't put a price on those kids are going to be our future leaders, our future criminals, our future folks that love the police and support them or not. And I look at our SROs as truly the finest ambassadors for community policing and the future of policing in our nation that I have. I'm more so than my street cops, my detectives. Those SROs make a difference every single day. And for Tomball, the city of Tomball, to maintain that impact is important. So we really do have to look at a 70-30 split. And my hope is the city family finds something that makes it work. And Councilman Townsend, we really didn't, the 70-30, I chose, in talks with David and then the year before with Rob, to not push it too much, because COVID, they gave all of our officers back. And it's not our fault, not the city's fault, but we got a whole bunch more time with our officers than what we bargained for when the schools closed down. So that was kind of I was trying to be flexible and give them something back last year. The second piece of all of this, though, really goes to what they use the acronym on this slide, NASRO. It's the National Association of School Resource Officers. It's the ultimate in making recommendations for school policing. And their gold standard is 1,000 students per officer. Right now, everyone around us, every school district, Klein, Cy-Fair, they're all at or exceeding that ratio, with one exception, which is just minimally over. So everyone around us has about one cop per 1,000 students. Tomball has one cop per 2,245 students. We are, at some point, I got to talk about officer safety, student safety, and community safety. That is the bear in the room to me, is that we have to grow it. And because if we don't, we're not living up to our end of the bargain. I mean, and neither is the school. So I think those are the two pillars that we really need to be talking about. Are we keeping the students as safe as we possibly can in the model we have? And is 70-30 a reasonable model for a city this size that doesn't have the facilities and functions of a county that can kind of take things and patch things together?
But we also have to look at the fact that Klein has their own independent school district police force. I believe Cy-Fair also has their own police force. I may be mistaken about that, but I believe they do. Tomball ISD is getting the benefit of having our police force police their schools, number one. And number two, the training that SRO officers get compared to somebody who's on the beat, out driving the car, pursuit, arrest, and those kind of things is completely different. And I think we need to stand up and say, look, folks, you want us to take those SRO officers back when your school's out, that's great and fine. But they're not trained to be out on the street like our beat officers are. They're
Correct.
just not.
No, you're correct, sir. And then the other aspect of this, you really hit something that's important to note. We looked at, Ricky did a study of about 50% places that had an ISD policing program and 50% of places that had a city police force like us. When we do a crime, if you can think of one of those horrible teacher against child crimes that we had to investigate a year ago, that was 160, 180 hours of investigations that had nothing to do with SROs and the police force in the school. The big cases that come from the school, the SROs at this point pass off and say, hey, rightly so, they pass it to our detectives, and Ricky's guys and gals are going full tilt boogie, a completely different direction. So they really are getting a lot more bang for their buck. The school is, by having a city police force, because we jump all hands in every single time. If I have an SRO, a school resource officer who's sick, I take it out of patrol or detectives to fill that. That's because I don't want to go skinnier in the schools. We can't.
I
I'm
just
not
think we
gonna
need
say-
to make sure that, because we all pay taxes for schools. That tax money should be spent on the schools. We all pay cities taxes, and we pay for these officers to protect our citizenry. That's what they need to be doing. That's my opinion.
And at the very least, the benefits, which if I recall from going through it, our benefits run about 32%. And at the very least, they should be reimbursing the 70% of all the benefits. Now,
They
I
are.
don't know how that contract of just a base salary
It
was.
is salary and benefits.
So it does
It is
reimburse
salary
all
and
of
benefits.
it. It's not just.
Yes, ma'am.
Also an officer's salary and benefits. Doesn't include training, doesn't
It
include all that
should include
equipment
all of
and
that.
all that. It should. It
It
should
should.
Right.
include 70% of what it costs to put an officer on the
Right.
street.
That's
Absolutely,
right.
because if you look at it as a full situation, you're probably more down like a 60-40 or a 55-45 is what you're really looking at
Well,
here.
Let me
And
say,
when you talk about our 30% that we get back, you gotta stop and take into consideration. That's when they take their vacation, or a lot of times, because when they're in school, they gotta be on that campus, you know? And when they're being trained, they gotta go to training in the summer. So are we really reaping the benefit of our 30% all the time?
well, let me say this. Ever since I've been on council, at the very beginning, Tomball schools in the city of Tomball were covered by city police. Outside of Tomball was covered by Harris County. It was at the direction of Rob and council to bring everything into the city. We, Derek, we voted on it.
That's fine, but
I'm not saying I'm not willing to discuss it, but in fairness to Tomball ISD, I don't think we can sit here and just point the finger at them. It was our direction to bring everything.
I
in-house.
understand and agree with what you're saying, Mark. 100%. What I'm saying is the 70-30 split is the issue. I think, yeah, Tomball should be doing the Tomball Independent School District. I believe that. We have that contract. I don't think we should have them just here in the city. If we're gonna have them in the city, we need to have them in all the schools so they can have the intermingling and being able to give information from Memorial to Tomball High School, whatever the SROs are, that blanket of coverage. But at the same time, let's make sure they're paying for it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Let me cover a little bit about SRO history and stuff like that. In 94, 95 is when we actually started the program. 97, I went in as an SRO and I stayed for 6 years as an SRO. I was it. The only reason the county came into SRO is because the city made a decision at that time to pull their officer out. That's before this panel said. The city pulled out precinct 4, et cetera, and they put their person in. After a short stint with them, they weren't happy with what they were getting from C4, so we took the program back over. But the school district has always asked us to do more for less. They just always have. We're at a point right now to where we're 1 to 2,400 students. That's
Yeah, I'm
not
not saying that's
not
right.
acceptable. We need to come to the table and we need to figure out how we can move forward with it, and what's beneficial for everybody involved. But as Councilman Townsend said, there is such a benefit to us being in the schools and maintaining those schools, because in my heart, we're gonna do a better job than somebody else does. So, but it's in the works. We'll see where it goes from, and you're gonna have more questions, because we're fixing to move forward with where the other staff is coming from that we're asking for. So right now, we're at 9 SROs, which includes 1 sergeant per 22,000 students, roughly 20 to 22,000 students. By 2025, we're asking for 3 additional SROs each.
200.
Each year.
3 each year.
So that's a total of 9.
9 SROs that will double the size of the SROs. That's because they're going to be in excess of 25,000 students. They're opening up a new high school complex, which is going to include 3, a high school, intermediate, elementary, whatever it is. They just opened up Baker Hughes, and they have nothing to cover their outside. The schools at a distance. They've got to do something. Chief talked about models. There's 3 models. you know, we can continue to do what we're doing. We can go to what he called a part-time, which is a 9-month contract, which is what some schools do. They work just like teachers and then they're off in the summer. If you want that disconnect between your officers here. And then you can look at, okay, do we take what's inside the city and we give the county what's outside the city? So.
Or do we make sure that they come to the table and play fair with all the schools?
I can
That's
tell you
four.
that's not what the school wants, but yeah, but no. We'll see where they go. But no, that's where your, you know, your additional 9 officers come from. This is just to get us to a comfortable status with SRO.
At the point that we have 9 officers added, what will our ratio of student to pupil be at that point in time? Ballpark. I can't hold you any guarantee, but what would that be? Chris, can you give us a?
Probably
It's a-
1,500.
It's about 1 to every 14 or 1,500, sir.
Do it, Chris. 18 divided by
25,000,
25,000.
1 per 1388 students.
So 1,400 ballpark.
Yeah.
That's still more than what the national recommendation is.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we ought to show them the national recommendation is this, you guys need
We
to pony up.
did a staffing analysis and gave it to them. And we polled 10 different school districts. 5 of those school districts have their own PD and 5 of them contract. They have all the information. They know what everybody's doing around them, and they know what it costs to have it done.
And they know they're getting a good deal. And even if they paid 100% of the salary and benefits of the police officer, they'd still be getting ahead because they're not running all that infrastructure, buying cars, all that other stuff that we're providing.
Right.
I guarantee you, if Harris County takes it over, they're not gonna do it for 70-30. Period.
Is there a?
We
age?
did, just to let you know, we've done our homework. Brandon reached out to precinct 3 constable. They manage 5 school districts. You remember what they are, Brandon?
They manage 5 school districts. A lot of their older contracts between Galena Park, Crosby, places like that are 70-30 split. Their newer ones with Dayton ISD, Sheldon ISD are 100% paid.
There it is.
There it is.
But here's.
But
what Go ahead, Chief.
Sorry, Ricky. Yeah, that 100%. Those officers are with the school 12 months a year.
But here's what you gotta look at. You know, their budget is like this with the county. It's huge. They can absorb some of that cost where we got 13 square miles that pay us taxes to do what we need to do with our resources. We can't continue, in my opinion, we can't continue to absorb what we're absorbing.
I think you probably got a pretty well agreement out of this dais. I would
It
think.
is a good benefit for us and them to manage the schools. It really is. We just need to come to a partnership.
Yeah, a better partnership.
No, and that's really why we wanted to present this. This is the facts. It gives us what we're trying to do and what the recommendation is. Like I said, once we get to the other meetings where we get to the funding and how do we approach this, then that's when we'll bring those recommendations.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Gives a total
That
of
just shows you the additional positions.
-2. What the heck's the -2?
The Air Force.
But you're not actually getting rid of those officers. You're simply
You're
reallocating those officers. So that shouldn't be a -2, guys. That should be a wash.
Well, they added them to the other departments.
I don't know who put this PowerPoint together.
Well, I think he left out 2,400 hours.
The breakdown of it on the patrol side real quick would be 9 patrol officers. Inside, you would add another community relations civilian and sworn personnel, 1 additional dispatch supervisor, 1 additional jailer to the growing, and then inside the investigation for the part of criminal side.
Yeah, we're looking at 1 juvenile investigator that would be assigned to ISD. That should come out of ISD's money because I'm tying up an investigator with school-related issues on a regular basis. Some of the major crimes we have with teachers involved and things that shouldn't be involved, and kids being assaulted on campus, and just a long laundry list of things. I'm tying up an investigator with school-related type things. The ICAC cyber crimes investigator we talked about, a task force investigator, and then SROs.
Okay, so you've got 9 patrol, 9 SRO, that's 18, plus 8 more. Minus the 2. So plus 6.
Yes.
So the total
Chief
is
will be happy to answer.
24 or 26.
26.
26.
26. And 26 brings the ratio per student to exactly what it is, per citizen, exactly what it is now.
Within 8
Yeah,
citizens.
it's pretty close. Yeah, it's pretty close.
Of course, this is operating cost. This is not capital, and
Well,
you've got capital on top of this for
That's
cars and equipment and
No, absolutely. And so then when you get into the support services of the additional work for HR, for IT,
yeah, it impacts,
facilities, needs that we have, just where we're gonna put all these folks.
yeah, where we're gonna put them all.
So then you start seeing, that's why we wanted to break this up into chunks so that we
Okay.
can present the why and the how. And then when we get to the recommendations, we can put them
Okay.
together.
Following.
This will be the largest growth that I've seen in the department, probably since I've been in the. And I'm probably the longest tenured officer. I think we were at 22 staff in the police department when I hired.
that's before they created dirt.
17 sworn and the rest were dispatched.
So can the fire department get theirs in 20 minutes?
Maybe it was right.
Any questions for?
They're not doing it today.
Questions, we kind of fielded questions.
absolutely,
as we
questions.
went. Any questions that you might have?
I think it's great information you guys have given us. I really do. If Chris can make the corrections on the PowerPoint and then send that back out to us so we can have that for reference, it would be great.
You approved 3 officers just to work specifically.
No stress. 1 plus 1 is 2.
They did a very good job.
Very good job, guys.
Thank y'all for the time. Appreciate it.
What else?
Feedback on the type of information, because this is the model that, as you can see, they're all here to watch to see what kind of interaction with, I mean, is this good and moving forward?
I do have a statement
Okay.
and Ricky and Chris and Chief.
Yes, sir.
I know that we are spending time out watching the new builds that are going on in our community, and I understand the reason behind that. Back when I was a boy, which was right after they created dirt, they had things called security guards that they would hire, and they would sit out in these subdivisions and make sure nobody was stealing their goods in their woods. Do we need to pass some kind of a ordinance here that if you're gonna build a subdivision, that you have to supply the security for your stuff so that we're not using our officers up watching your materials?
Sir, we absolutely talked about the idea of working with zoning. It wasn't about human capital. It was more along the lines of certain camera equipment, like Flock is, I don't want to sound proprietary, but Flock is one of the cameras that comes to mind that has license plate readers, and a lot of communities around us. The city of Katy has, I think, 38 cameras that if you're building new development in Katy, excuse me, that's part of it written into that. You will have a LPR car cameras out there that are tied to the police station. And Chris can attest to, we've been able to solve crimes and utilize those cameras around there. So, well, I haven't discussed the idea of writing in, you have to have security guards. And frankly, I don't know if crime in new developments lends itself to say we need 24-hour security. But I really do believe if we look at the model of crime reduction through environmental design, and when we have our zoning meetings, and it's something that Nathan Dietrich, probably sitting behind me, as we've already talked about with him. And Ken Cole, the reason he's in community, one of the reasons he's in community relations is his relationship to zoning, to be able to talk to new apartments and new houses going in to say, let's talk about lighting, let's talk about cameras, let's talk about ingress, egress, and where foliage is going to go, and those types of things. So I think we are trying to get ahead of that, sir. But I didn't say, think about security guards.
Well, I just think that we need to put our officers in protecting the citizenry, not protecting some builder's materials out there that he has
Yeah.
decided to go off and leave unprotected. I think
Yep.
that's unfair. It's unfair to the citizens of this town that are paying taxes for the security of police force. I think we as a body need to come up with something that says, if you're gonna put your materials on the ground, you need to have some way to watch those materials. It's not up to us to do it. Period.
Well, I don't think it is our responsibility but to me, I don't see our police officers parked out there watching those. I mean, that's the risk that the builder takes if they want to drop materials and not have
What is
other
the-
means out there. But for us to drive through an existing subdivision that's being built, I think we should be doing that, just like we do private businesses and drive around.
What is
their
our
facilities.
crime rate in the new, as far as materials being stolen? Because the price of materials has gone skyrocketing, as you're well
Oh,
aware.
I'm sure.
So
They get
what is the
stolen.
crime rate in our new subdivisions of materials being swiped?
I don't have an up-to-date number for you, which I can get one, but what the trend that we've seen in the investigations is a lot of that material they've got is covered under their insurance. So we've had cases we've investigated where you've got people who work for either the same builder or a different builder, seeing people over to go over here and steal their wood and move it to this location so they can report it stolen, so the insurance pays it out and they use that to build a different house. We've got with the price of wood, I mean, we had a huge increase. About a year and a half ago, I'd say we had a significant amount of resources that we had to investigate them. Of course, we got the officer taking the report. And we did have crime missions. Hey, we need to focus on the subdivision, we need to focus on construction because we keep getting stuff stolen. We want to catch them. We caught a bunch of people. We caught some people in the act of a burglary, stealing copper out of a relatively new, very expensive home. The number of reports have gone down, but what I've also seen is that they will call the officer, say, look, I don't want to file a case. I just want to.
Correct.
And I just want to report this. You're tying an officer up on the case. So
So I think
it's give or take over time. This has changed.
I mean, it's to their advantage to have those cameras and that
A lot of them
throughout their
do,
subdivisions.
do contracting with cameras from a camera security company now.
I think we ought to mandate it. I think that if you're gonna develop here and you want your materials to be secure, it's up to you. It's not up to us.
I don't think we should mandate it. I mean, we shouldn't be telling businesses what they have to spend on that.
Well,
That's their loss.
yeah, but then again, we tie up our officers investigating stuff because it's just sat out there in the open and it ties up taxpayers' money again to benefit them because they're gonna file on their insurance to make money off of it. So
I don't think we should be telling businesses that they have to do that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Craig, you got anything? Nope. All right, are there any other questions? Motion to adjourn?
so move.
Second.
All in favor?
I
Any opposed?
No.
Do I close this too? Okay.